haven't developed a whole lot yet, so we're still in the process of that. So the first phase is do a baseline forecast without the cabinet.
So the baseline, if the cap measures were not implemented, here's what the inventory would look like in 2023.
Yeah, without it. And then the second phase will be quantified with the cap measure and see what it does.
This isn't for the chair this evening.
I don't think so.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, hello. Just if you can hold on a second, we're still gathering here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Philip, you can call the meeting in order if you want.
Well,
I just read the bylaws.
is that true?
No.
No, I don't.
Not live.
See, what's our charter say about your maps?
There was a bit of traffic on the freeway.
Can you get an ETA?
Or automatic street closure.
See, is it 15 or 20 minutes for a full professor that you have to wait? 15 or 20 minutes that you have to wait for a full professor?
I think it depends on the university. I don't know.
I was already on time. But if no students showed up in 15 minutes, I would be.
So, are you in charge of the next 18 months? How does it work?
For now, yeah. That sounds like good.
Dr. Lou gets here, I think we should have a vote.
Mike, in charge of development.
Says that
The
every first,
organization
I'll get
has
him.
been a couple of years.
As long as it's not before he gets so here.
That's right.
I'll be watching carefully.
Yeah.
What's the next?
2020,
10 minutes.
2020, we have to submit an inventory.
It's because
Oh, his ETA is 10 minutes?
It's a big,
that one is.
I don't
it's
think.
money.
I need to know whether to start the meeting or.
We've always done.
Because for the like VC, state staff solution of software. Because I'm curious about whether you're
No, I don't think so.
So next on the
For 2020.
Okay, so
Airplane, don't call.
So hello, everyone, and on the phone. Dr. Liu is running just a little bit late, so he'll be here in probably 7 minutes at this point, but we're just going to go ahead and get started. I'm not going to pretend to do opening comments for Dr. Liu, but why don't we go ahead and do introductions. Philip Fine, Deputy Executive Officer, Southwest SCAQMD.
Zurich Preservation Planning and Rules Manager, Southwest SCAQMD.
Rong Shen, the Southern California Association of Governments.
Carlo Dela Cruz, Sierra Club.
Martin Hansberger with Holiday Rock.
Bill Lamar, Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance.
Janet Wittes, California Council for Environmental and Economic Balance.
Dan McGivney, SoCal Gas.
Bridget McCandless.
Kurt Coleman, Southern California Air Quality Alliance.
Art Montezuma International. Tyrone Turner, Dakota Communications.
Ann Scagliola, AQMD. Khadija Abdullah, AQMD.
Bill Long with General Counsel's Office.
Okay, on the phone from EPA.
Hello, this is Amy Zimfer.
Hi, Amy. And California Resources Board.
Yes, this is Brian Clerico, and I've got some other staff here in the room with me. This is Patrick Gaffney. Andrew Martinez and Gerhard Offley.
Okay, thank you. And anyone at SEEB remotely? No? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the minutes. Any comments on the minutes?
I do have.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
I was late, but I was in attendance remotely.
Sorry about your name, by the way.
Yeah, it's all right. My parents were actually close to naming me Marco, so it's kind of funny seeing it. But small adjustment to the minutes.
Okay, did you send it to Aunt?
I will.
Anything else, Bill?
Yeah, on page 2, under CARB regulatory activities, my recollection from the notes that I took, that I asked Brian a question about the status of of their CTR reg. And it said Brian provided CARB updates on proposed and recent regulatory activities. I don't know if Ann meant to have that included in there, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down where it says Bill Lamar inquired about the emission reporting requirements, and that clearly addresses the CTR reg, but it's not. I would prefer that CTR or the entire name be spelled out so that we know what we're talking about. It's kind of like inside baseball here. So
Okay, we'll do both. We'll say emissions reporting and
yeah,
CTR is criteria and toxics reporting.
right. Yeah.
Okay. Carlo, just to be complete, did you want to mention what your small change was, just so everyone knows? And
Yeah,
kind of
just
know?
I don't believe I'm listed as members present in for the January 9th meeting,
Okay.
so just wanted to change it.
Okay. Any other questions on the minutes? All right, so next on the agenda, Amy, or you want to do a EPA update?
Yes, I just have a few brief things. Thank you, Phil. Hello to everyone. I just wanted to let everyone know for our fine particulate plan, this is the PM2.5 plan, the 2006 National Ambient Air Quality Standards Serious Area Plan. Our final rule approving most of that plan was published on February 12th, 2019. So that's the first action that we've been finalizing on the SCAQMD. And then just a few funding things. The Clean Diesel Grant announcement for the DERA funds for 2019. The request for application deadline's been extended to March 26, 2019. And we are expecting approximately $40 million in grant funds to support projects. These are aimed at reducing emission reductions from the existing fleet of older diesels. So we're glad to have that open. On the targeted airshed grant, that application process has closed, and we did receive and are currently reviewing a number of applications, including a few from the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And then I'll just stop there, Phil, but if folks have questions about any of the other national rulemakings, I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, I'll leave it there.
Any questions for Amy? All right.
Does that Moyer also part of the 40 mil? The 40 gallons? You mentioned some money for diesel.
That's the DERA Diesel Emission Reduction Act program. That's Moyer's a state program.
Okay, so
Just
where does that fund? Where is the 40 gallons?
I'll take the question. For the Diesel Emission Reduction Act, you're asking what the program is? Is that your question?
Well, where does that money go to? Does it go to administrative? Does it go down to the site level? Where is it?
Yes, it is. We accept applications from state and local air districts, any cities, any other nonprofits, and the funding is used to do everything from replacing engines in trucks to purchasing new trucks to any other sources of heavy-duty diesel. So we have a number of rail projects, off-road vehicles, etc.
Okay.
So it is used for actually doing retrofits or replacement.
I find kind of strange talking to a machine, but
I'm sorry.
That's okay. The question, I'm with the school district also as an elected. We've been benefiting from some of the monies from SCAQMD for the buses, but I have vehicles that go back to 92 that are used in my facilities because we've increased our lunch programs all year round, and we're serving like 10,000 more meals during the summer. And it requires the use of a lot of our vehicles to transport the meals, and this is in high poverty areas and such. But it's benefiting our test scores. So I'm looking to see what would it take to get some money to replace some of the vehicles that I have. And they're basically reefers. They're small, medium-sized trucks that are refrigeration units and such.
And they're diesel trucks?
I don't know. I don't probably not. I think they're probably gas, but I can check. But I also have some vehicles in the yard.
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I also have some vehicles in the yard I can check today with, our guy should be back, he had an injury, so I'll check with our transportation people. But the 26th will be, that's what, another 2 weeks from now.
Right, yeah, it was originally scheduled to close in February, but we extended it because of the 5-week shutdown.
And who would we get the application from?
Yeah, that's great. So we have two options here. One is you could partner with the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and they could put forward an application on your behalf, and I'm sure Phil can provide a contact person.
Well, he's
Or
jumping
you
up and
could
down
have
ready
your
to help me.
facilities folks talk directly with my people, and they could better explain the program, and you could talk more about what your interests are to see if there's a match. So maybe the quickest thing is for you to, maybe Phil, if I may, have the contact person sent to Ann, and then Ann could connect us to, and I'm sorry, sir, I didn't get your name.
My name is Art Montes. I'm a trustee in also Centralia School District. We service the cities of La Palma, Buena Park, and West Anaheim. If you're familiar with Knott's Berry Farm, that's where we're at.
Great. Well, Mr. Montes, I would love to have your folks talk with mine, and we can see if there may be some potential here.
Yeah, and I know there's other districts that would be, would look at it. But any help that you can assist us in, because 85% of my money goes to salaries, and that leaves very little money for the vehicles. As you can see, the vehicle's 90, since 92, that would place at 10, 20, 30, almost 30 some years old.
We've had some wonderful projects with school districts over the years, and we find great benefit because it really does help to reduce emissions for children in particular.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, so Amy, if you send us your DERA contact, we'll get it onto Art.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for Amy? Federal side? All right, CARB activities, Brian, I know you guys are busy.
Yes, I thought, based on the last meeting's questions and interest expressed, I invited some CARB staff here to talk about, one is the reporting regulation. There were a lot of questions about that last time. And then also I have some staff from eCars here, because Dr. Liu had expressed some interest in infrastructure or green infrastructure type projects. So to get right to it, I thought I'd throw it to Patrick Gaffney here, working on the reporting regulation.
Hi folks, this is Patrick, and yeah, I'm the lead staff on the reporting regulation. We initiated the process about a year ago, and I'll give you maybe a 2 or 3 minute recap on where we are in the process, and then we can open it up for questions. As most of you are aware, we went to the board in December with a proposed regulation that included we call it the baseline applicability that's in 8617, which was the legislation that kicked off this whole process, this reg process. And the minimum requirements there were for facilities that were subject to mandatory reporting at 250 tons or more per year criteria pollutant, or were elevated had elevated prioritization scores. That really didn't go far enough in terms of protecting community health, so we expanded the applicability criteria to include sources that are in selected communities as established by AB 617. So that's the proposal we brought to the board. When we brought it to the board, we received a lot and the board directed us to go back to the regulations as part of the 15-day review process or change process, and to look at that as fourth applicability, the one that was focused on such communities, and expand that to better satisfy the public health and air quality reporting objectives of 617 and 197 and other CAR programs. So that's what we've been doing since December, is revising the regulation. We've been working with the districts, with industry, with environmental groups, the whole realm of stakeholders to update the regulation to adjust that fourth applicability. We're about to complete a round of 5 workshops. We've been in Sacramento, Oakland, yesterday and the day before we're in San Diego and LA, and tomorrow we'll be in Fresno to talk about these 15-day revisions. The largest change to the reg we're proposing is expanding the scope, where reporting would be required not just within the selected communities, but statewide. And there would be thresholds for that. Right now, as is written in the regulation, and this regulation is available on our website now, the proposed 15-day changes, which are drafts. We haven't put out a formal 15-day package yet. So currently in the proposed regulation, there's a 4-ton per year threshold for criteria pollutant. Except for CO, that's got a 100-ton per year threshold. So if you're below that, you would be brought in if you were anywhere in the state. And then for toxics, we've gone back to an approach that was used in the hotspots regulation in Appendix E, where there are multiple sectors identified, and each sector has either a specific threshold identified or it's a no threshold category. So for sources like metal platers, if they're doing metal plating, they don't have a threshold, they need to report under this program, regardless of the quantity of work that they're doing. But other sources like backup diesel generators, they would have thresholds such as 100 gallons per year for Tier 4, or if they're not Tier 4, it'd be 30 gallons. Paint shops, currently in the proposal, is a 30-gallon threshold. Gas stations, it's a 25,000-gallon threshold. For charbroiling, it's a 10 million standard cubic feet threshold. So basically all these sectors have different thresholds. So that's what's out there now. We're doing these workshops in mid-April. The plan is to put out a formal 15-day package with these proposed changes. The idea is to have a regulation effective on the street January 1st, 2020. We're still working on the roll-in, basically when these provisions start coming in terms of timing. We definitely have the first year would be business as usual for districts, in that they would report whatever they're reporting to us now, and then in future years, the requirements become more stringent in terms of the data being reported. I think the last point on this is, as it's envisioned now, virtually all the reporting will still come through the district. So there will not be a double reporting mechanism. It will come through the district and then it will be provided to ARB, pretty much as it is now, but the scope, of course, is expanded and the types of data is expanded also. So that's what I've got. Any questions?
That was Patrick on the CTO.
On the emissions inventory?
On the reporting, right?
Right.
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Patrick. This is Bill Lamar with the Small Business Alliance. And thank you very much for your outreach. I was at your workshop yesterday and have been a regular participant last year and this year because this fourth criterion that you have really hits at my constituents. You might tell the if you can our group what the comment period is on this current go around. It's 15-day. I think it's the end of this month. We intend to submit comments citing our concerns as well as our constructive recommendations. So,
Yeah, thank you, Bill, and also for clarifying that. Right after the workshops, we're asking for informal comments, so we can fine tune the proposal. Then after that, we release the formal 15-day, and that starts the regulatory process, and then we accept formal 15-day comments. And I am saying 15 days, most likely the comment period will be extended beyond 15 days because of the complexity of the changes. We just use that as shorthand. And then we would, of course, appreciate your formal comments then. But if you can get comments in now, we can fine tune the requirements before they go formal.
well, Patrick, David told us yesterday, the deadline for comments was March 29th.
Those are for the informal comments. And so those are not as part of our regulatory process. These workshops we're doing, they're not required as part of the regulatory process, but we want to do that as part of the outreach to include as many people as possible in being made aware of these changes.
But they still will be considered though, right?
Absolutely.
Right, sure.
Absolutely. The difference, there's these informal comments, we do not have to respond to them formally in the rulemaking, but after we put out this 15-day package in April, every comment we receive at that point in our final documents, we need to respond to every single comment about how we addressed that comment or why we did not address it. We do not need to do that on these workshop comments, but we will absolutely be considering all of them.
Good, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? I had a question just because I saw EPA's announcement yesterday that they had issued citations to a whole lot of folks about illegal importation of non-compliant engines and vehicles. And I was just wondering whether our inventories capture that, whatever illegally imported engines and vehicles may be actually out there.
That's another really, I appreciate that clarification. This regulation will only focus on permitted sources, except in very limited cases, unless the districts are already inventorying unpermitted sources. But right now, it's only permitted sources, so those would not, the sources you're mentioning would not be included in this.
That strikes me as a little odd because I think the intent of 617 and the language of 617 wanted a comprehensive inventory.
I totally get your point. It's like we can't inventory that we don't know where it is or where it exists and where it's being operated. So we're viewing this as a first cut. You know, that we have received quite a lot of input from environmental groups saying they want to go beyond permitted sources. You know, they want to go to any source, like you're saying. I just don't think we can bite off that much of the apple right now.
There is a parallel effort at CARB and at AQMD that for the AB 617 communities to develop the modeling tools necessary, inventory tools to get a full picture of what's happening in those communities. So it's not just about, this is one tool on the stationary source side, there's other tools on the mobile source side.
Yeah, I think that's the idea when 617 was passed and signed was that there wasn't confidence in the accuracy of the inventories. I'm not saying South Coast inventory, which is everybody else. Certainly the issues have come up and things like startup shutdown, malfunction emissions, but also non-compliance and things like that. Bill, you had another question?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. Chair Liu mentioned, I guess, penalties raised for engines that were, I guess, counterfeit or imported illegally.
Yeah, they weren't permitted.
Yeah,
they weren't certified.
and your response, Patrick, about your only consideration being permitted sources. There's a difference here at South Coast. We have some non-permitted sources in Rule 219 and 222.
It's expanded that.
Yeah, and it's going with 1147. It's going to be expanded even more. Are those going to be exempt? I don't know if you're familiar with the district's two rules that I referred to, but maybe Philip can shed light.
The only thing I know is the reg is focused on permitted sources or other sources that are currently inventoried by the district. So if inventorying those 219 or 222 sources, then those would be subject to the reporting. The twist is only permitted sources are used for determining applicability. So those sources need to trigger applicability be subject to reporting.
So at South
But I
Coast,
also did want to circle around in terms of the unregistered sources. I think someone already kind of pointed out this. For the selected communities, those are going to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, every source is going to be, the attempt is going to be made to identify every source in those selected communities. But this reg is a statewide regulation, and so we can't apply that same level of detail throughout the entire state.
okay, so there's kind of two aspects to that. So one is at South Coast through 219 and 222, we have a set of sources that don't require the full permit but are registered.
Right.
It doesn't sound like as of now that they're going to be required to report to the statewide system.
Year one.
And there's
Well, we don't know.
a difference necessarily between reporting and inventory. When they show up in the inventory, they might not be required to report, but if we can account for their emissions by including them in the inventory, that would relieve the bureaucratic burden of having to report and keep the inventory accurate.
It's not like
closer.
It's not like we don't estimate emissions now for AQMP purposes from all sources, whether they're permitted, whether they're registered, whether they don't require a permit, or whether they're mobile sources. The question is, this system that CARB and this rule that CARB is building, how much of that goes into that system, and then how much is actually required on the facility to report, or will CARB accept some of the estimation tools that the districts already use on some of those other types of sources. So I don't think there's been a decision made on the 219 exempt or the registered sources yet. You know, I think there is some value to having them in the system for a lot of different reasons, but I think it's just going to depend on how easy it is to get that data and whether our estimation tools we think are accurate.
So then, I guess just to be clear, if those facilities with 219 or 222 equipment, they're not going to be required to start
Filling out reports.
Filling out reports.
Not as of now, per the CARB reg this year, that's true.
Not in year one, but
Yeah.
maybe in the future.
If they want to, I don't know whether, I mean, it could always change in the future, but then there's the district reporting rules too. So if the district can decide that we want more data and there is some reporting aspect to it, that we want that data in our system,
But
then that's
wasn't it
possible.
painful enough just to ask them to have to register?
Well, if they're going from a permit to registration, it's not painful at all.
Okay.
It's going the other way.
Well,
And I think if my memory serves me correctly from 24 hours ago, I think the CARB staff said that they were going to accept the districts or the air districts estimates for gasoline stations.
right, based off fuel, right?
Based off
Yeah.
fuel.
Actually, what our rule 461 actually requires gas stations to report their throughput right now.
Yeah,
So it's a matter of organizing that data in a way and using it
so that.
in a way that we can satisfy what CARB needs. There's a lot of sources like that we think there's some very easy, whether it's us doing an estimation or just for asking the facilities for one or two pieces of data and putting it into some calculations we can do. I think there's ways to do it where it's not going to be very burdensome. There are going to be some sources that may not be reporting now, and for toxics reasons are going to have to do a little bit more than they do now. One of the bigger issues on the toxic side is we're talking about metal working facilities, like the emissions estimations aren't very good. We don't capture fugitives very well, right? So how are we even going to do those estimates? There's a lot of work that needs to be done to even make those emissions data more accurate than it is today, because we know we're missing a lot. So those are the things that are going to take some time to develop.
Yeah, this is Patrick. I appreciate the discussion about the reporting too, because we do have provisions in the reg to allow for what we're calling abbreviated reporting for the gas stations and the backup generators, where the districts could provide that information based on data they collect rather than having to go to every single facility and have them report to the district or to the state.
Thank you for that. Were there any other questions on the ARB update at all? Anything?
I had another topic.
You had another topic you want to cover?
Yes, this is Brian Cargo. Yeah, so I also, thank you, Patrick, that was really good. I also invited, based on Dr. Liu's expressed interest in, we'll call it green infrastructure or transportation type projects, I invited staff from our e-cars division here to discuss, I think, areas of interest that would be of interest to South Coast. So this, I've got Gerhard Patchalik.
That's right. This is Gerhard Patchalik. I'm the manager of the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure section within e-cars, and I'll just we focused on hydrogen infrastructure and tracking battery electric vehicle infrastructure or plug-in vehicle infrastructure. So I'll just give you our primary mission is to do supplemental work or supplemental activity work for the zero emission vehicle regulation. So we're not as our core is not as much of a regulatory section. I'll just give you a quick overview about some projects, and we work with the California Energy Commission on the Division of Measurement Standards in Food and Ag and a lot of these activities. But just to give you an idea, there are currently 64 hydrogen stations funded in the state, and 33 of those are within the South Coast SCAQMD, and then 21 of those 33 are open and dispensing fuel right now, and this is for light duty side. And then there are, right currently, as our value as of last October, there are over 3,000 fuel cell vehicles in operation in the South Coast and 5,000 statewide. And our projections based on surveys, we expect to have by 2024 close to 23,000 fuel cells in operation in the South Coast. And then on the sort of heavy duty side, there is the Project Portal, and that's a project with the Port of Long Beach and Shell and Toyota, where they have a 1,000 kilogram production tri-generation facility. And tri-generation would be they are using a stationary fuel cell to generate electricity, hydrogen, and heat. And they're supplying what will be 10 prototype long-haul trucks that will be used in the future. Toyota will use those to distribute them or ride to dealers and other activities. But there are also fuel cell yard tractors, forklifts, and looking to electrify from the fuel cell perspective the port. There are a couple other renewable hydrogen production facility in the greater South Coast area. There's a 2,000 kilogram a day, 100% renewable production facility in the Moreno Valley, and it's projected to add an additional 3,000 kilograms. So we're looking at a green production of hydrogen, where the traditional method is steam methane reformation, and even that method on a well-to-wheel basis is much cleaner than gasoline or diesel. But we're looking to also take that to the next step of using more renewables, reducing carbon emissions, and depending on how it's produced, taking criteria for those emissions down. And we have there are also 2 fuel cell forklift facilities in operation in the greater South Coast area. One is with Kroger Foods and one is with Cisco in Riverside. The Kroger one is in Compton, and there are 5 statewide. And so that allows, they're mainly used in indoor application and replacing battery electric fuel cells. But with the fuel cells, you get consistent energy and use throughout its operation period. Batteries tend to degrade until they need to be recharged. With the fuel cell, they can operate at the same efficiency at the end of the shift or the same power or performance at the end of the shift as they do at the start of the shift. Then on the regulatory side, we are in the very early phases of investigating if there's a need for states to develop a station verification effort, and that would be to confirm the proper operation of a hydrogen dispensing station that would make sure that hydrogen stations dispense fast, safely, and consistently. And we're investigating, since hydrogen, in a sense, is a brand new fuel, then we need to take hydrogen to the same level of reliability and performance of the gasoline station, which was developed over 110 years, and we're trying to do this in a much shorter time. So it's sort of like a really high-level summary. If you have any questions, I wasn't sure, what kind of information you're looking for, so I didn't want to distract too much from what you're asking or looking for.
Yeah, we have one question here. Art?
Well, I got several questions.
I'm sorry. We have several questions here.
Yeah, one of the interesting things over the years that I've observed, my name is Art Montes with AM International. Also, I'm with the school board and work with civil rights organizations. We're gonna be looking at, with our organization and launching some programs in the communities for social justice issues, more energy efficient vehicles and such. But one of the interesting things is that there's never been I've seen, and maybe I'm wrong, a comprehensive program that overlaps and looks at, if we're gonna go into hydrogen and electrical and such, you look at the minority communities and communities of color, there tend to be a lot of rental units. And even when the rental units are built out, the vehicles tend to be older that the individuals use, and then you don't have the ability to plug in like you would if you own a home and such. And so it makes it a lot more difficult. So it'd be interesting to see where you guys are locating the need for these stations if you're going hydro. And then also if you're looking at it comprehensively, because those are the communities that are facing the greatest challenge from the health risk. And when we look at the air quality in those communities, it'd be interesting to see if we're addressing a remedy, the type of remedies either from the federal and state levels to those communities and providing those remedies and resources to rectify and mitigate those issues from the air quality. And it's because a lot of, and I'll be frank with you, it's because there hasn't been it hasn't been addressed a lot by our community, and it hasn't been addressed, frankly, by a lot of the environmental communities, simply because of the makeup of their boards and such. But we want to look at that, and I would be interested to see if you could provide us with data on that. And then you mentioned the ports, but in the Orange County, we have a huge distribution centers located around Fullerton, in the Fullerton area, where we have Albertsons, Kroger, all the big distributors, and it'd be interesting to see how you're working with them. And then you've had a huge emergence in the grocery industry in the Latino communities and the Asian communities. So it'd be interesting to see what type of outreach you've done in regards to those facilities and educating and changing the culture there. Do you have any background on that?
So this is Andrew Martinez. I'll take your questions one at a time. The first one, in terms of disadvantaged communities and communities where there are large numbers of rentals and multi-unit dwellings, that's actually part of the core justification for why the state is looking at supporting both zero-emission vehicle fuels. Or, it's very difficult to make the argument that if we really need to transform our entire fleet over to, of all vehicles, over to zero-emission vehicles by, say 2040, 2050 timeframe, that's all going to be achievable with a single fueling platform or a single drivetrain platform. There are certain aspects of BEV that work in a lot of cases, but there are certain aspects of fuel cells that work in a lot of cases, and that's actually one of those core kind of cases that is actually a strength of a fuel cell for multi-unit dwellings, where you're probably not going to be able to get one charger for every single vehicle at that dwelling. Having centralized fueling options, which is what the hydrogen model is, it follows the gasoline model, it's a good option, right? It provides fueling opportunities for people who may not have charging opportunities at home, right? And it can be done sited near home, near work, along their commutes. There's all kinds of different strategies that are out there that the state has been looking at. To answer your question in terms of how these stations are sited, the Energy Commission actually manages funds for hydrogen fueling stations, but they do take recommendations from us. Through Assembly Bill 8, there's a whole process of analysis and reporting that's required cooperatively between CARB and the Energy Commission. We developed a tool back in 2015 that we also updated in 2017. It's the California Hydrogen Infrastructure Tool, DHIT. It is freely available. It does essentially try to analyze where the first adopter market will be and look at where the funded stations are and planned stations are and try to find the gap for where we need more fueling infrastructure. It does that both on a market evaluation in terms of where fuel cells might be garage say, but also where they might be driving. And we've since been doing analysis for related DHCs, and I believe our latest analysis showed about 1/3 of all populations within DHC actually have convenient access to a hydrogen fueling station. In terms of the vehicles, then there's the CVRP program, which does provide additional funds for any ZEV to those who have who meet a low-income requirement. So I know it's still, there's always a question on the analysis of how far that goes, but there is that effort within CVRP. I'd also mention that CARB and in addition to other state agencies, through our collaboration and our membership with the California Fuel Cell Partnership, this past year the partnership published a vision for 2030, it's the California Fuel Cell Revolution, and we utilized our tool to try to help visualize and understand what would it look like getting a network of 1,000 stations that can enable the deployment of 1 million fuel cell vehicles as early as 2030. And in that analysis, we found that we can create a network that proportionally replicates the existing gasoline station network. It provides the same amount of access. It's not the same capacity, but the same amount of access in terms of how convenient it is to where people live and where people drive. And that station network that was adopted in that vision, that can provide convenient access to essentially 100% of all disadvantaged community populations throughout the state. So there is vision, there's work towards it, making sure that we're not leaving behind any community and doing that. To your question in terms of on-the-ground outreach, I think that is definitely a valid question. Our process so far through AB8, it's always been a public open process. So the Energy Commission holds workshops when they're developing draft concepts for a solicitation. It's a public document. They accept comments through a comment period and quite honestly beyond the comment period as well. They want to make sure they get these things right. So we always encourage, and right now actually there is a current draft solicitation. There was a workshop, I believe, last month. Technically the comment period is closed, but I know that they would still accept comments. If you are looking to provide comments, the solicitation number is 18-HYD-04. And so if you Google that pretty quickly, you can find where you would submit comments. So that process is going forward, and this will actually be potentially a momentous solicitation because AB8 provides $20 million per year, and in the past, the solicitations have been done on an annual basis. But this solicitation is saying we're going to essentially count on getting those $20 million every year and for the remaining years of the program and select station developers based on giving them the flexibility to try to plan for that larger amount and plan a multi-year program. We've seen that that's a very important part to getting to scale and getting more stations out there quickly. But in addition, I think your comments in terms of getting to the community, particular communities, that's probably something that's more directly related to our 617 staff. I think we may be able to circle back with them. And then in terms of distribution centers, so the projects that Gerhard mentioned that are focused on the ports, those have been funded two ways. One part of it has been funded through the Energy Commission Alternative Renewable Fuel Vehicle and Technology Program, but also through our own CARB GGRF funds. And so those kind of get directed by, through CARB staff recommendations and policy recommendations, but also legislative direction. So the particulars of how those funds are used and where they're spent in some regard, those are programmatic decisions, but I don't think it necessarily means that distribution centers inland should be ruled out or are intended to be ruled out. So I would personally suggest that when the next round of funds for GTRS comes up, if there's any opportunity to provide that feedback, I think that would be a valuable opportunity.
Thank you for your comments, but one of the questions that I wanted to get an answer was, I'd like to see the actuals. What have you apparently you've been working at it since 2015, so that looks like 4 years. So you should have had at least some best practices and some actuals in the field as to what is being done for those communities. And that's what I would like to see is actually what actions that you've taken or what practices that you've done in those communities, and what have you actually done there in citing stations and addressing it, and what have you learned from that? So if you could provide that back to us at some later at a later meeting, or to Dr. Liu, I would appreciate that as we start to formulate best practices and legislation.
The list of stations is on the California Fuel Cell Partnership's website. They have a very good map of all the stations and list of all the stations. So you can get that just by going to the website. You can learn a lot by going to the California Fuel Cell Partnership website.
Okay, thank you.
I think that this came up in the context of conversations about concerns that the infrastructure, both for electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles, may be the biggest holdup of getting the technology commercialized and in place to the extent that we need it to reach our attainment goals and to protect public health. It seems like these, especially in the heavy-duty sector, the car manufacturers, the truck manufacturers, the off-road equipment manufacturers, can kind of build whatever they have to if they have a market. The infrastructure is kind of a thing that is complicated. I know the original goal was 100 light-duty fuel cell stations, right? Is that still the plan?
Yeah, that's the ABA. Well, the ABA signpost, I would say. The ABA requires at least 100, but that ABA runs through January 1, 2024. So we are more than 2/3 of the way in terms of funded stations, a little bit over 1/3 of the way of them open. As Gerhard mentioned, there's still 25 that are under construction now. Most plan to be open this year, if not early next year.
Yeah, and I'm just concerned. I know if we are to get to the place where we actually have heavy-duty trucks using hydrogen on a regular basis, we're going to have a whole lot more of hydrogen available to do that, and they're not going to be able to fill up at these stations. They're going to have their own dedicated stations. And
yeah, that's largely the case today. I know that the Toyota demonstration truck actually does use light duty fueling. They essentially fuel a whole lot of tanks at once or multiple times on their truck, but there's a separate protocol, there's a separate nozzle. The intent is going forward that heavy duty trucks will have their own fueling facilities, but that doesn't mean they can't be co-located with light duty fueling. Similar to how you have, truck stops and rest stops today, you have gasoline and diesel combined at one station. But to your point, that is actually a very valid point. It's something that the state has been dealing with, especially in terms of just the production capacity, and especially if we want renewable production capacity within the state. So the Energy Commission actually funded that, or partially funded the facility that Gerhard mentioned earlier in Moreno Valley. That was a solicitation that they put together in 2017 to be able to fund 100% renewable hydrogen production facilities with at least a 1 ton per day production capacity. So they announced that one. They actually later went back and said they had funds to fund a second facility, which is in the San Joaquin Valley, that actually does 1 ton per day. So it's a very valid comment. The interesting thing is with hydrogen, what we're looking at is there's the question of how how do we go from today, where we're clearly past the demonstration pilot phase, we're in an early market launch phase, but we need to get to a large-scale deployment phase, and that's the interesting question right now, is how to make that turn in that shift. But if that turn in that shift can be achieved, that means that costs come down for all of these technologies. So with a larger light-duty vehicle deployment, you get economies of scale on the fuel cells, so that the vehicles themselves become cheaper, and we've actually seen that translate to heavy-duty vehicles because of the experience of Toyota and some of the bus manufacturers as well. But then on the other hand, the hydrogen right now itself is also very expensive, and for light-duty vehicles, the auto manufacturers are covering that cost for the first 3 years. And so it's about 2.5 times more as expensive as gasoline, rough estimate. So obviously it needs to come down if everybody in the state is going to be able to utilize it. But then these heavy-duty vehicles, they use so much more hydrogen. So as more of those vehicles come online, you get the economies of scale on the fuel side, and that would be able to translate to the light-duty vehicles as well. So there's some interesting possibilities for synergies. There's interesting possibilities to make this happen, and the fact that it essentially kind of gets quote-unquote easier with greater scale. It's just how do we make that transition and ensure that scale can happen? And then it's all those questions there.
Aaron, actually, the level of participation from industry is definitely increasing. Certainly when this program started with, I guess, AB 118, I'll say in 2008, this was very heavily government funding, incentivized. But there's a transition, and an example I can give you: the Air Liquide announced that they are building a liquid hydrogen facility. I think it has a 30 ton per day capacity that will open within like the next 3 years. And so that's a sign right there, that industry is recognizing that there's a demand for hydrogen, and we're still a long ways of replacing all of our gasoline fleet, but we're definitely incrementing our way towards that.
With the reliability of the light-duty stations, is it as much fuel as it is compressors going down and other problems?
I think today the biggest challenge would be assurance of a steady, predictable supply. The stations themselves are seem to be operating reliable, and one of the things we've seen is that the most recent stations that are being built have 2 fueling positions with 2 completely independent fueling positions. So in a sense, we're replicating the gasoline model, right? If you go to a station that has 10 nozzles and one of them is broken, you have to maybe wait in line but pull to the next one. And now with hydrogen stations, we're starting to see that they will have at least 2 fueling positions. So if one goes down, there will be another one available.
And in addition, there's a move now within the industry away from, in the past, most of the stations were gaseous delivery and gaseous storage, and that requires a lot of compression on site. And compressors, as you noted, some can be finicky. I will say that the industry has figured out a lot of things through the last 4 or 5 years of experience at California's hydrogen stations. But they're moving now to liquid. And liquid storage, you can have a pump, and that's much, A, lower energy cost at the station, B, much more reliable than the compressor, and has much lower maintenance costs associated with it, and much longer mean time between failures from everything we're hearing. So that reliability is expected to, at least at the station side, be only increasing or getting as good as it can. As Gerhard mentioned, it's been an issue mostly of reliable supply, and that's kind of where we're coming to this question of where are we going to get a lot of production, especially if we want it to be renewable production.
Okay. I know you're not Bill Quinn, Janet.
I know.
You have his card.
I don't get in my own nameplate. Hi, this is Janet Middick from SEED. Just a really quick question in terms of infrastructure costs. Recently on the Advanced Clean Trucks workshop, there was a number of examples provided comparing electric with diesel with fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell, and I was surprised to see the very high cost projected out to 2030 for the fuel cell vehicles. were those estimates based kind of on very conservative notions of commercialization? Or do you see if we get a big win and we get much higher penetration rates, that those costs are gonna come down quite a bit?
We didn't actually, I can't say, I'll have to look for those, but this was on the vehicle cost or the fuel cost?
This was on total cost of ownership, so I was looking at,
Total cost of ownership.
yeah.
We do expect the cost to decrease with scale, and an example I'll just say for hydrogen, when Shell entered back into this field, they announced, it was in some of the public statement, they said simply through scale, and their scale was, I think they referenced 15 stations a year worldwide, they could reduce the capital cost of a station by 50%. If they get 100 of these, like 5 years of 15 stations a year, they could just, without any new invention, without any change in process, they could reduce the cost of a station by 50%. So that's a positive sign. That just means scaling up will give you reduction without, having to have a scientific breakthrough. And I haven't heard a quote like that for the vehicle, but I would think this scale applies everywhere. When you're building 100 vehicles a year or even 1,000 vehicles a year, your scale is not the same as 10,000 or 100,000. Because it impacts the whole supply stream, because the fuel cell manufacturers aren't making their own membranes. The membranes are supplied by other vendors, and once those other vendors see, a clearer projection that this is a growing area, they're going to invest in being more cost effective.
And the caveat we should mention is that the clean truck reg, that's a different group from ours, and so we were not involved with that, but we could probably try and find the correct staff to get an answer specifically to your question of what were the assumptions behind those numbers.
Yeah, you may want to try to build in some communications around uncertainty, because those numbers are pretty dramatic, and I would hate to see that projections where there's a high degree of uncertainty could actually foul efforts because they don't look viable compared to other options. So it's something to look at.
I do know that
it was
I do know that part of the issue is because of the scale, right? And so when we're looking at long term, and you're thinking about converting over, doing more than simply like a demo of a few buses or a few trucks, and you're trying to think about converting a company's entire fleet, or at some location entire fleet, things start to look different than on either side of that coin. So we can probably try and reach back to some of our colleagues here.
That would be helpful if you could get that information. I think also that we want to make sure that to the extent that people are changing over entire fleets and that Shell is opening up stations throughout the world, that all of them kind of come to South Coast first. We have the need. I have Art and then Bill Mark.
Yes, one of the things I've been discussing with Dr. Liu and others is that I represent a civil rights organization, and I'm working with several other ones, and we're going to be pushing heavy initiatives across the state and nation on going green because of the effect on our communities, and also because of the vehicles as they come off the secondary, as they come onto the secondary market, it'll help reduce the cost of the energy in our communities. But I'm concerned, like one of the other members here, was the hydrogen and the cost and such. So we need to get some hard cost, because when I've asked other individuals, nobody seems to have a handle on that. And then also the ability to form co-ops, because there's now the political will on our part to move forward from our community, and we can count the votes, I think, in the Assembly and the legislatures to move it through. It's a question, is it economically feasible, and is it economically smart and politically smart to move on it? Because our first initiation would be to clean up our public institutions, those vehicles that get exceptions on the license, to have them clean out their barn first. And any leasees, anybody that's getting any allotments from any government facilities and such, and then move with our particular caucuses, the legislatures and at the legislative branches to change at least the political and legal aspects of it, to not wait till 2030 or 2040, but to move this within the next 3 years, especially if they're leased out. But we need to get some hard facts, some actual costs. I can't go on visions and concepts. If I'm gonna go to the table, I need some hard dollar amounts to be able to put forth, because it's an economic question. And that's what it's gonna come down to, the budgets and maintenance and sustainability. So if you can get those figures to us, the better it is for us to move this agenda forward. Thank you.
Okay. Bill Lamar?
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill Lamar. One of my member trade associations boasts a membership of 2,700 gasoline service stations. With the ramping up of electric vehicles, charging stations, and now hydrogen, I think we started with the hydrogen highway some years ago, I have yet to see a plan that anyone can show a small business owner why they should go to the burden, expense, and risk of making changes in their current properties to accommodate these other fuels. Does one exist in terms of what it will take, what sort of a footprint that a small business service station would have to have?
A lot of the existing ones are at service stations, the ones that have been built.
Yeah.
So there's got to be an emerging model, you would think. I mean, of course, it's heavily subsidized at this point.
Well, you need a marketing plan. In other words, somebody's got to be able to sit down, not just a
Right,
regulator,
especially
but
for gas stations that are operating at what, 1% profit margin or something? It's pretty narrow, right?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, you have to. You need to approach these people from a profit motive, not an emissions motive. And there's going to be considerable build outs and construction and time, just like when they change out underground storage tanks, unproductive time. So, why should this family-owned business go to that expense?
Good question.
So right now, just to, I don't have a complete answer for you, but right now, I think as was mentioned, on these hydrogen stations, they are being located, at existing retail stations, and the party putting them in is paying the station operator lease. So they're leasing a space, either a space on the island or a parking spot, where they're using it to put the hydrogen dispenser. And in some ways, I don't have any facts or figures. It follows the Propel model. Where Propel put in E85 stations at existing gasoline station, and that gasoline operator got revenue through Propel, not directly managing the gasoline sale, not demanding the sale like gasoline. So this is, it's an early phase, and right now the burden is taken off the station owner because another entity is willing to invest and pay a lease for the space.
And to add to what Gerhard was saying, I mean, to be honest, that's actually probably economically disadvantageous to the people who are operating the hydrogen fueling themselves, right? Their vision and their model is usually they want to essentially be, either somehow cooperating with gas station owners, or gas station owners are maybe wanting to purchase the equipment and they're helping to operate it, or something similar like that, to where they're not having to pay lease or pay rent money every month. To your question in terms of the physical capabilities, as Gerhard said and was mentioned, they are on existing gas station properties right now. There's always, as with any project, there's always all kinds of permitting issues, etc. But there are definitely models, and it's pretty fairly well known in terms of if you want a certain capacity of liquid or a certain capacity of gaseous, there are tools provided by national labs. The equipment designing companies and the station development companies, they have their own proprietary information, our own proprietary models, but the vision of this being able to be on a normal gas station property, I can't give you a hard number in terms of how many, how many places could you one for one get the same capacity, fuel the same number of vehicles, but the technical capability is there to be able to do this at a large number of station locations. One thing that actually is still in the works is that hydrogen, there are still permitting hurdles to doing the undergrounding, like you were saying, and some operational hurdles there. But the industry is working on those, and that's envisioned to help as much as we're getting much larger stations with going to liquid, getting the storage underground is going to enable much larger, another, kind of leap in terms of capacity.
Yeah, I guess, with all due respect to your comments, if I was a gas station service station owner with 10 pumps, you really had, your commentary there just really didn't do a lot to excite me that, this is a business opportunity for me, and I've got a lot of running around to do or sort of surfing on the internet to find these various national labs and other entities.
No, I think what he's saying really is right now, if you have a gas station, you have the space, you might be able to entertain leasing out some of the space on your lot so that someone could come in and put in a fueling station for hydrogen vehicles, and then you collect the lease every month, and maybe it's not anything more than that headache, and they do all the permitting and everything else.
Yeah, and all I'm saying that
Right, that's right. That's correct. And to date, we haven't yet really seen any hydrogen pumps replace gasoline pumps. We've seen hydrogen pumps added to the existing gasoline pumps, and some of the new stations, in the past, they were kind of off on the corner of the lot. Now they're actually kind of being integrated under the canopies. So in some way, it is just additional business potential for that station owner. They're getting the land, they're getting the land rent money. Potentially, they're getting additional foot traffic into their convenience store. Depends on how you model that or how you look at it. So there could be that. I will say, anecdotally, especially with some of the very early station developers, we do know they were personally very interested in being supportive of environmental goals. But it's absolutely, like you said, to get to widespread adoption, that's not going to be the case, right? So there are a number of hydrogen stakeholders who are continually evaluating the economic case. There's a H2USA, it's a collaborative through the Department of Energy. There is an station investment group in there, and they're always trying to get the right data. I will say it is difficult, right? We're in a stage where we haven't yet really seen a station built that is probably going to be the model for the type of economic model you're mentioning, right? So there is a little bit of forecasting involved, a little bit of uncertainty, but it is recognized that there needs to be that business case made. I will say that in terms of just general station finances evaluation through the AB 8 legislation, there's a joint agency staff report every December and released by the Energy Commission. It's us in collaboration with the Energy Commission. And there are economic analyses on an individual station-by-station basis there for a few different types of stations that have been seen in our network so far. So it could be interesting to take a look at that. I don't know if it necessarily would answer the question you're speaking or asking, but it could be maybe a starting point at least to kind of get some idea of what the finances are that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I recognize that, this is something that presents, an opportunity for smaller businesses. But I also think, believe that there needs to be a more user-friendly plan or something that shows me what those opportunities are and how soon what I have to invest, how soon I'm going to get that investment back.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other updates from the Air Resources Board or questions or comments? Anyone on the phone? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Brian and Patrick and Andrew for all of that. Much more full and interesting conversation this month than normal months, so we appreciate it. The next item on the agenda, any public comments, Rita? Next item on the agenda is item 5. Philip Crabb has joined us. It's turning to springtime in Sacramento, the time when legislation blooms. What do you got for us?
Well, I will just kind of provide, as usual, the legislative committee reports, and there was one held last Friday on March 8th. There was plenty to discuss. I'll start with our federal reports that were given. Of course, there's packets, legislative packets that include written reports from our federal and state consultants. But some verbal updates that were included at the meeting. SCAQMD had a successful advocacy trip to DC recently, and members of Congress and their staff, business representatives and other stakeholders were supportive of a timely and transparent rulemaking process as it relates to the US EPA ultra-low NOx emission standard for heavy-duty trucks. It's something that the agency has been pushing for a couple of years now. Also, Mr. Andrew Wheeler was confirmed by the US Senate as the administrator for the US EPA. And also, reference was made to President Trump's budget overview that was recently released, and they'll be followed by more details. And SCAQMD has been working on annual appropriation requests to members of Congress as part of that budget process. On the state side, it was mentioned that speaking of blooming legislation, the bill introduction deadline recently passed, and the legislature introduced 2,621 bills, which is a new record. It is about 500 more than they did last year, so there's no shortage of good ideas, or ideas. Also, just want to note that the California Assembly Natural Resources Committee will be having an informational hearing on March 18th regarding AB 617 program implementation. I think folks from around the state are invited to come share what's been going on the different communities. Also, in late February, the most recent cap and trade revenue auctions was held, and all 80 million allowances were sold at a price of $15.73 each, which is about 11 cents above the floor price. And that generated about $850 million for the state's greenhouse gas reduction fund account. And that could obviously potentially provide more funding for clean air in the South Coast region. The next auctions are going to be in May, August, and November of this year, and project to generate about $800 and $900 million each. So hopefully there'll be plenty of funding for folks to compete over. Also, there was an update provided on SCAQMD's sponsored legislation regarding the voting district authorization for clean air bill. There was basically, wanted to just say that now we do have an author for the bill. The bill number is SB 732, and the author is Senator Ben Allen. Now, spot bill language has been introduced, which basically means there's no substance to it. We met the introduction deadline with a standard kind of spot bill, but basically more substantive, refined, and streamlined version of the bill language has been submitted to Legislative Council. So we're hoping to get that hopefully next week, so that we can go ahead and alter the bill and go ahead and put in the more substantive language. And part of that process has just been reaching out to stakeholders, legislators, getting lots of feedback, and adjusting the language, modifying the bill, streamlining the bill to really focus on what's important in terms of establishing that voting district. And we're continuing to communicate with electeds and interested stakeholders basically to educate and promote support for the bill. It was also stated, basically feedback was also received from various stakeholders regarding the tax cap issue relating to the bill. Now again, I just want to reiterate that this bill really would just be more logistical in terms of creating a voting district that future funding measures could be put on the ballot for. But this particular bill by itself, if you did nothing else and it got signed into law, it would not generate any funding. So it just creates the opportunity for a future. However, Given that, in terms of any future funding measures that would come, the impact on the sales tax cap, we want to make it clear that the language would provide an exemption for the state cap, allowing for equal, basically, application of the tax throughout the region. Also, an important point is that it would not impact any existing tax cap space. So if there's cities, counties, transportation agencies, that maybe they're in an area that there's, a full cent or a half cent left in terms of available tax cap space, our bill would not impact that, or any future funding measures that would come from it would not impact that. So that has been an issue in terms of many folks that run their own sales tax measures wanting to protect their own possibilities for future funding measures. So that's the update on that. Another update was provided on potential congressional field hearings on the federal side. And basically there was a possibility that there's certain congressional members from the region that will be holding field hearings to address some of the environmental or air quality related topics. Obviously that'd be an excellent opportunity for us to engage, show what's been going on with the district, challenges that we're facing, and there is a strong possibility that we'll be able to have some of the field hearings within the district. We're still working on that process. It's going to depend with the congressional members, when they want to do it and where they want to do it. There was also 3 bills that were taken to committee for action. One was SB 210. It's regarding heavy-duty vehicle inspection and maintenance program by Senator Leyva, Connie Leyva. This bill would authorize CARB to adopt and implement small check requirements for heavy-duty, non-gasoline trucks by modernizing emission controls and enforcement through a comprehensive inspection and maintenance program. Basically would enhance compliance and kind of ensure more even playing field for the trucks, the folks that are doing the right thing versus the ones that are skirt the rules. Basically the committee adopted a support position on that bill. Just wanted to note though that staff did want to speak with the author's office, suggesting a few adjustments to the bill. One will be clarifying that zero emission trucks are exempt from any small check program that would be created. And also the second one would be recommending that any penalty monies collected as part of the program be designated as funds meant to assist local air districts in mitigating heavy duty truck emissions, with the penalty monies being distributed to air districts based on where the penalty originated. The second bill was AB 210 by Vopel, Senator Vopel, and this is also a small check related bill. This bill would exempt from the small check program all motor vehicles that are manufactured prior to the 1983 model year. That would be a change from the current law that exempts vehicles up through prior to 1976. It's kind of called the classic car exemption currently. So the committee, basically this is something that would definitely increase NOx emissions and VOC emissions within the South Coast. So the committee did adopt an opposed position on that bill. And the last bill is AB 285 by Assemblywoman Friedman regarding the California Transportation Plan. And this bill would require Caltrans to address in the California Transportation Plan how the state will achieve maximum feasible emission reductions of GHGs in order to attain statewide reduction of GHG emissions of 40% below 1990 levels by the end of 2030. So staff would like to work with the author to discuss that the bill also require how to addressing maximum feasible criteria for pollutant emission reductions to attain the state and federal ambient air quality standards by federal deadlines. Committee adopted a work with the author position on this bill. And I just wanted to note that there are recent amendments to that bill that we're analyzing that may impact how we move forward on it. And that's my report.
Okay. Questions? Bill?
Philip, on this authorization, when do you expect to have language in there? I think all I've seen now is may to shall, I guess, is the only change that when I looked on the on what's on that spot bill now. But
right.
When do you expect? Are you going to be or is the author going to populate that with language in there?
Yeah, so the way it works, we prepared new draft language, submitted it to legislative council in the Capitol in Sacramento. The attorneys in the Capitol basically may rework it, whatever they think is the most appropriate way to reshape the language, not changing the meaning. So we are waiting for them to finish that process and are hoping to get language back by next week. Once we get that back, I would expect that it would be amended into the bill sometime soon thereafter.
Relatively short. Okay, so then then it would be up to the cities like Los Angeles or San Bernardino or like that to put this measure on their ballot, or the district can do that themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the draft language would allow for a voter-driven initiative.
But it would be air quality management district-wide.
Right.
As a
All
single,
four
as a single
As a
vote,
Right.
which can get tricky, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, and the board, I think, also has an option to do it because any initiative can only do what the board has the power to do. But it would be a region-wide,
Right, either by
process.
voter initiative or by governing board vote, it could be put on the ballot.
Okay, and then if it's by voter initiative, it would be the same tax then. In other words, LA wouldn't have a half a cent and San Bernardino have 3/4 of a cent or something like
Right,
that.
I mean, I would imagine so, but if it's by voter initiative, it's however the people write the proposition to get it on the
It would
ballot.
have to be consistent. If it's in one
It would have
region,
to be
it
considered,
would have to be.
It'd have to be
Yeah,
consistent.
yeah.
if the district wrote it, right?
The district or the,
Whoever
if
did
you
it.
can't have an uneven tax, you have to,
Oh,
they're all voting for it for one thing, they're all voting for one thing.
Yeah, you can have people in San Bernardino voting for a heavier tax for people in Los Angeles who wouldn't quite be fair with it.
No.
All right, we've been tracking that because just to see, we have some comments and concerns about it. Thank you.
Art?
A couple of questions. On the money on cap and trade, is that gonna be hijacked again by this governor, or is the money all gonna go into one pot, or what's the situation?
Well,
Is it gonna go for
It
the
does go
intent?
into the greenhouse gas reductions fund or the GTRF
Give it to all the-
fund, and it is part of the budget process, it usually comes out of the budget trailer bill. Everyone's kind of fighting for the money in a sense, and the budget, the governor's budget proposal that they put out in January did not establish a payment, or basically an allocation plan. That's usually just an initial draft. In May, the governor will do a revise based on some of the new allocations and revenue that's been received by the state. Again, they're predicting how these other future options are going to go, but they don't know necessarily for sure. And of course, the Senate and the Assembly get involved in a negotiation for that funding. So it is part of multiple stakeholders and all the legislative leadership and the governor involved in the grant negotiations and allocation for the year.
Sounds like making chorizo or sausage.
The 60%
Yes.
continuous appropriation is still in place as of now.
Yeah, off the top kind of cut that goes to things like the bullet train and sustainable housing and things like that. That gets taken off the top, and then it's really, you're fighting over the remaining 40%.
Yeah,
That's
so
discretionary.
it's a train that's never appeared anywhere. This one's
Maybe in
never
Central
been
California
purchased.
sometimes too, that
Yeah, it's a ghost train, they're sneaking. It's our little ghost train we're all looking for. Now, on the field hearings, who's having field hearings?
So, this is for congressional members, and so I'm not sure actually the specific members myself, but when they went out on the DC trip, there were, I think some of the members are considering possibly having, field hearings, informational hearings on different topics, some overlapping with our issues on terms of air quality and things like that, so but it's still developing.
Obviously, you made a trip there, so you met with.
I didn't go on the trip myself, but, they met with numerous members of Congress, I know also with the EPA, folks like that, so I think it's still in the works.
Yeah, because they've got a lot of new members in the OC, so I'm just wondering if we're gonna have hearings down there.
It's possible, it's still being developed, so it's still tentative, we can provide a future update for you.
Okay. And then the other, is there any monies, the money that you guys are looking for AQMD, how would that be distributed? What's the intent? What would be the outlet? Where would the money go?
Well, the intent is to meet federal and state air quality standards,
Okay.
and the money would go to pay for the, provide incentives to replace equipment and vehicles necessary to do that.
Yeah, but when you're selling it.
You'd have to look at the 2016 air quality management plan to get an idea. I think it was 278,000 engines that need to be replaced
On that order, yeah.
in order to get to attainment.
So if I'm Mrs. Sanchez or Mrs. Ching or Mrs. Chang and I'm going to the grocery store, and you're gonna charge me another half cent
No,
on
because
my tax?
you don't pay a sales tax on groceries.
Okay, so I'm gonna pay on Home Depot.
Unfortunately.
Or whatever.
For other things, yeah,
What
toothbrushes.
would be
Home
the
Depot,
incentive on my part to give money to fix the trucks?
Because every dollar invested in clean air pays back multiple dollars in public health benefits.
Okay,
And
then
it
the other
prevents us
question
from
would.
getting federal sanctions, prevents us from having basically all business shut down in the region, and the federal government writing a federal implementation plan that would differ quite dramatically from our state implementation plan.
So how would it help the neighborhoods, the areas?
Clean air.
Would it impact those?
We'd be in compliance with clean air standards, so they would be breathing clean air,
Okay. so-
cleaner air. I mean, depends
So
how
it
you
just
define
basically
clean.
go back to your general fund?
No.
It would be supplemental to the general fund?
It would be, I mean, there would be some administrative costs that would be, the agency would have to obviously incur, but, I would imagine 95% of the money would be spent replacing those engines and other equipment and things necessary to get us to
So it
attainment.
would come back to our communities? and
Yes.
come to our-
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm just, because if you're gonna sell it to me and you're gonna sell it to our water
Yep.
block.
Yeah, I would have to, I have to keep an open mind too, right? But it would have to be invested in all those things that we identified in the air quality management plan that have to get done to get us to clean air. So in that plan, we have laid out all the different things that need to be turned over and all the type of technologies that have to be in place in order to get the federal air quality standards. And we need the air quality standards too, and this would provide the resources to make that happen.
So the next question, the political question would be, have you guys done any polling? Have you,
Yes, it's in the package.
Okay. And then, and so you've done across the spectrum.
There.
We've done 2 public surveys, the most recent one was in January.
You go to the ballot probably in November, right?
No,
Not this year.
2020.
2020, so you get the highest.
At the earliest.
And I guess one of the most important things, at least to me, is that we would avoid the Section 185 fees.
Yes, you would. That's the idea, right?
Yes.
That's the idea,
Nobody
avoiding
wants to
Section
revisit
185
that
fees,
again.
where stationary sources have to pay, assume the penalty for all the mobile sources not cleaning up.
And so that means that the feds are gonna clean up the ports and the railroads?
No, that we would be cleaning it up, because we would have the money, the feds wouldn't have the
Well,
money.
I thought it would be an
Feds might
equity
shut
issue.
down.
Yes, if I'm the federal
I'm being
government, and I'm
sarcastic.
not speaking for Amy, who I think's on the line, but if I'm the federal government and I've been told, you have to now manage the South Coast Air Basin, and I'm looking at it and thinking, okay, well, there's 75,000 facilities, or there's 75,000 permits and 26,000 facilities. I could tighten down the permits on all of those, or I could look at the inventory and see, oh, look at that. All the emissions are coming from ships, from the port off-road equipment, from the trains, from the drayage trucks. Simple enough. We'll shut down the ports for 3 days a week and your entertainment. Right? That'll do it.
Well, sounds like a good shutdown solution from DC.
But do you think, how do you think that might impact our economy? And how do you think that might impact your ability to find food on your shelves and lumber at Home Depot and everything else? It would be absolutely devastating. So we don't want to do that. We want to find a way to incentivize the turnover of existing equipment and engines necessary, and perhaps with the ships, capture technology
Well,
to
the
capture
question
the
is,
emissions necessary to get us to attainment.
if you're looking at a sales tax, wouldn't you look at a transportation tax, or be the ones that would be there?
We've looked at everything.
Well, if you can pass a transportation tax, then let me know how you do it.
No, I'm just, it's a question.
Test, 1, 2, test.